Welcome to the Boulder Criminal Lawyer Podcast with Janene McCabe. I'm your host, Elena Nicole. In this podcast, we'll break down the criminal justice process and answer the questions many people have, but often don't know where to ask. From what criminal defense attorneys actually do, to what happens during an investigation or arrest, or how cases are built and defended in court. Janene McCabe is a criminal defense attorney and skilled courtroom litigator who has taken nearly 100 cases to trial, representing clients in municipal, county, and district courts. Janene, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's dive right in. Let's talk sexual assault cases a bit. How do police investigate sexual assault?
A lot of times it's going to start with the victim themselves. When have they made the allegation? Was it right away? And if so, they want to try and collect some physical evidence. And that may start with sending them to the hospital and having them be seen by a sex assault nurse examiner. That person will collect swabs, DNA, saliva, any other blood evidence that they might be able to collect and send off to a lab, and then do a full interview of that person. But in other cases, maybe they reported it several days later. And so there is no physical evidence to collect. Maybe there is no bruising. There is nothing more than this person says, I had sex with this person. It was not consensual. And so it's really going to depend on when the person reports the allegation as to what evidence is going to be collected at that time.
And what evidence is typically collected in sexual assault investigations?
The majority of the time, if the person has made the allegation within 72 hours of the sexual act occurring, they're going to want to try and get evidence from that person, taking them to the hospital and doing swabs. The swabs could be of the mouth, of the intimate parts of the person. That includes breasts and vagina for women and penises for men. And so they're going to want to swab all of those areas and see if they can collect any sort of DNA evidence or any sort of saliva off of a person.
Mm. And what mistakes during an investigation can actually create legal challenges?
Well, sometimes there are swabs that are collected, and maybe the swabs are contaminated in some way. But a lot of other times, maybe swabs are collected, but they don't definitively show the DNA evidence of your client. And so you want to be able to talk more about what exactly is on this swab, what is on this slide, and is this in fact a contributor from another person and not your client?
And how do defense attorneys challenge sexual assault accusations?
Again, we're going to start with, well, what exactly is the nature of the allegation? When did it happen? Does it line up with the timeline? Does it make any sense? And then also, what are the other factors? Were there other witnesses around? Did two people meet at a bar and then they went home together? Who else saw that interaction? Was one person drinking too much? How much? How do we know? Was there testing to determine how much was in their system or what was in their system, if anything? And then is there physical marks to show that a person actually was physically assaulted, including the sex assault, bruises on the wrists or legs or arms, what kind of evidence to support or to contradict what the witness is saying.
Yeah. And as a criminal defense attorney, how do you fight a sexual assault accusation?
Yeah. So again, the first thing you're going to do is meet with that client, right? Find out exactly what the client is saying about the interaction. Was there an interaction with this other person? If so, what was the nature of it? What did that look like? Was it consensual in their mind? And if it was consensual, what facts support it being consensual? Text messages the day before, talking about getting together, and what happened after the sexual event. Did they get together for breakfast, right? Did they go out to the park the next day? What were all the actions both before and after? They're going to help paint a picture of whether this was in fact a sexual assault.
Yeah. And what should someone avoid doing immediately after an accusation?
Avoid talking to the person. If the person says that they're making an accusation about a sexual assault, you want to stop communicating with them. It's really common for the police to do what they call a pretextual phone call, which means they get the victim on the phone and they listen in and they call you and talk to you about what happened and try to get you to admit that you raped them, or that you did something against their will, or that they were too drunk and that you knew that they were too drunk. So you really want to be careful and not answer the phone or not answer those calls where it seems like they're really trying to trap you, and they'll use that against you.
Yeah. And how does a defense team actually evaluate statements, timelines, and digital evidence?
You got to take the whole picture first. You got to start with the general idea, and then you got to find out if there are problems with that timeline, right? Is it not practical? Does it not make sense? Does it defy the laws of science if they're trying to say they're in two places at once. So we start by the big picture, but then you really want to dig in and find out each little piece, does it fit with that timeline?
Yeah. And what is the best defense in a sexual assault case?
That's really going to depend on the allegation, quite frankly. There are certain defenses where the only defense is that you didn't do it. That's probably the most common. Then, probably right after that, is cases where people thought that they had consent, and only later did they find out that the other party says that no, it was not consensual.
And what role do credibility and inconsistencies play in these cases?
A huge role, right? So many times when we're talking about these kind of cases, there are no witnesses, right? There is no other party present to say what actually happened. And so you're really going to have to pay attention to why this person would make an allegation that's false. What led them to do that? Did they have a prior bad interaction with you or with some other person in the past as to make an allegation?
And how long does a sexual assault trial actually take?
Generally, you can count on a sex assault trial taking at least a week. Sometimes they take less if there's only one witness and there's not a lot of physical evidence to support what the witness is saying. But generally, you count on it to take at least a week.
What factors determine whether that trial lasts days or weeks?
It's really going to depend on the number of witnesses and the number of physical evidence to support or to detract from what the victim, the alleged victim, is stating. So, if there's just one witness and there's one police officer who investigated and there's no physical evidence, that trial may not take very long. But if there are a number of witnesses who saw the two people together before the allegation, or saw them together after the allegation, or there's some physical evidence and there's going to be experts coming in to talk about what the DNA evidence shows or what the saliva evidence shows, all of those types of witnesses are going to take much longer.
Yeah, so how do expert witnesses and pretrial motions affect trial timelines?
Dramatically. So, expert witnesses who are going to come in and talk about evidence that was collected, you're going to have to spend some time in some pretrial litigation, finding out if they are in fact qualified to give this expert opinion. Did they have sufficient time with the actual evidence in this case to give an opinion? And then once you get to trial, it's going to be all about testing their qualifications in front of a jury, testing their bias in front of a jury, and testing their ultimate results.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Janene. This has been such a great conversation about criminal defense, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.